BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, I'm Bradshaw and this is a Scottish Football Podcast. All the news, views and analysis you need on Tuesday the 25th of March as the inquest into the Greece flop continues.
Constantilia slips into Pavlidis and it's finished by Solis. What a start to the second half. Less than 20 seconds on the clock.
What now for Scotland and where did it all go wrong? Is it the last chance to catch Falkirk in the Championship?
Falkirk driving into area, deflection, Stewart with the layoff, Spencer onto the right foot, curls towards goal! And it's a beautiful finish from Brad Spencer!
Livy host the league leaders tonight and there's a new face in the Championship.
Neil Lennon is the new manager of Championship side Dunfermline Athletic. The former Celtic and Hibernian boss has been appointed till the end of the season. The Pars are second bottom of the division.
Like everyone else, I'm fascinated just how well Neil Lennon got on at Dunfermline.
The Scottish Football Podcast from BBC Sports Scotland.
Welcome to the podcast. On Tuesday, we've got two brilliant guests as we get into the deep dive onto how horrific that game was at Hampden. First of all, we're joined by Stephen McGowan, football writer. Stephen, how are you?
Morning, Raymond. Very well, thank you.
How were you at the game on Sunday and did you enjoy it?
I was. I managed to blag some SFA freebies in true sports writer style. I think to say I enjoyed it would be putting it quite strongly. It was a good start, a good strong start, and then it kind of all went downhill from there. In a fairly inexplicable fashion.
A very Scottish way. We're also joined by Craig Telfer, presenter of A View from the Terrace. Craig, you were at Hampden. Mm-hmm. I saw that you started off the week by interviewing George Hurst. How did they end? How did your weekend?
Well, I'll put it this way. I booked the, Monday off my work so I could go and get a massage and go and have brunch. So I think that was much needed after Scotland's performance on Sunday night. I feel I needed some well-needed me time to get that performance out of my system.
You've changed. Yeah.
Crazy how people call you a millennial, Telfer, and then you go out for brunch and massages. What a way to live your life.
Highly recommended.
Right, so let's just get into it. So we have to start at Hampden because we're still on the kind of fallout from that. The Nations League campaign is still kicking on. We've had the games, qualifying's already started, Wales are playing tonight, whereas we are just like in the mire. Stephen, it was just awful, wasn't it? Did Steve Clarke get the selection for the starting 11 wrong, do you think?
Not for me. I mean, I felt to me like the beginning of a long goodbye to me, Ray. It was...
okay.
I think this is a manager every manager has a shelf life, and Steve Clarke's been fantastic. He will be remembered as one of the absolute top Scotland managers. I don't want to necessarily get obituary, but equally... I think 6 years is a long time. I think by the end of the World Cup qualifiers, and I think we will probably have reached the end of the road. I think that's just a fact of life. I mean, I don't think there's any prospect of the SFA doing anything before that. He's very much the man of the President, Mike Mulroney, will stand by him. But I do think that the goodwill, which looked as if he'd recovered after that Hungary fiasco, has drained again after that game the other night there. It's an ageing team. You look at the starting 11, the average age was 30. You had two 33-year-olds on the lower levels of English football. You had a 42-year-old goalkeeper. You know, even Scott McTominay's 28. You know, Billy Gilmour was the only player under 25 in the starting 11. So I think probably we're reaching a point where after the World Cup qualifiers, it'll be time for a bit of regeneration. What the future looks like, I have no idea. But right now, we just have to find a way through these World Cup qualifiers without the whole thing petering out, I think.
Yeah, that's such a grim sentence. And those stats about the ages, I think Greece's average age of their team was 23 and 4 days. So they started one player older than 30, unlike us. Craig Telfer, what did you think about the selection? Christie out wide, you had Hanley and Ralston, who I thought were excellent on Thursday, but not playing a lot of game time. Ryan Christie coming back and Lewis Ferguson dropping out. What did you make of it all? Do you think he got the right starting 11 and right formation, maybe, Craig?
Well, I think formation, yes, I do, because I think the back four suits us when Kieran Tierney's not there. That's been a big criticism, is playing with the 3-4-2-1 formation when we don't necessarily have Tierney and Robertson linking up down the left. So I do think the formation was right. I just think it in the middle of the park, but I think the Greasy's first and second goals came from being like not having anyone patrolling the penalty box, being overloaded. And I think that perhaps if Ryan Christie had been playing in there, as he's been doing for Bournemouth, I think he's developed into a real high calibre central midfielder, box to box, who's really having a sterling time of it. I thought he might have played in there, so I was a bit surprised to see him playing out wide. That's not necessarily a position that I've ever really think he's been comfortable in. And I'm surprised a bit that Lewis Ferguson was dropped for that. I thought he had a decent game in Greece, and I think that it's probably criticism that a lot of people made. You've got a guy there who is one of the captains for a top Serie A team in Bologna, and I think most people would have preferred to see him in there instead of like an aging Kenny McLean. And that's no disrespect to Kenny McLean, because he's been a fantastic player for us and he's given us some phenomenal moments. But I think, going back to what Stephen says, I think that this period of renew and regeneration, I think that if it wasn't in the back of people's minds, it'll certainly be at the forefront now after Sunday.
Yeah, because all three of us were at the game. How did you feel, Craig, when Steve Clarke makes subs before the 70th minute for a change, which is a nice novelty, but he brings Billy Gilmore off, and you can just, at that moment, you could just feel the crowd turning. Do you think, like Stephen said, that goodwill is gone?
It certainly feel like it. I winced when I heard the boos from the crowd. I've never heard the Hampden being so openly mutinous towards the manager and his tactics and his changes and the way the players were playing. There was one bit as well in the second half, I think, was where Kieran Tierney was running out of ideas and just passed the ball back to Craig Gordon from the halfway line, and that elicited a lot of boos. And I think that the manager and the players, they've had a lot of goodwill, particularly over the last 2 years. I thought we must be coming up for the 2-year anniversary of beating Spain at Hampden, which was one of the all-time great results. So they've had a lot of praise, and I think that when people aren't happy, they're, I wouldn't say entitled, or maybe I would. Yeah, they're entitled to let the manager know that they're not happy with it. I thought Billy Gilmore certainly wasn't the worst offender. He wouldn't have been the player that I'd have removed in that period.
The problem here, guys, is when you have a bit of success, the expectations go up, don't they? You know, managers can be a victim of their own success because people demand and expect more. I think that's where Steve Clarke is now.
Because, well, you say success, and we've qualified for tournaments, we've never really turned up. And Craig, you're right. The Spain game, I think off the top of my head, was the 28th of March, because I was doing a tour show in Canterbury and I was hotspotting my PowerPoint off my phone, and the internet crashed because I was getting so many WhatsApp messages that Scott McTominay had scored. So that's how I knew we were winning. So, yeah. Stephen, you're talking about the average age of this Scotland team. We brought in a couple of players who are fledgling internationalists starting off. You get James Wilson, Max Johnson got, I think, about 7 minutes combined. What did you make of the newer players, George Hurst included? Is it time to give us optimism with these people coming through?
Difficult to make a judgment on George Hurst, isn't it? I mean, it's really just cameo parts is coming on. I think what you would like to see is you get 2 friendly games in June. Is it Iceland and Liechtenstein? Is it?
Yes, that's the one.
I mean, surely those are 2 games where there's nothing to be gained from playing the old stages again. It's probably time to start learning something new, trying something different, trying to enact that regeneration process we're talking about. So you would be as well bringing in your George Hurst, bringing in your Lennon Millers, bringing in Max Johnson at right back. If we don't have Aaron Hickey back fit, I think everybody really wants that to happen. And just see what they can do before the World Cup qualifiers and give them a chance. We know that the tried and tested players are capable of. I think we need to now start finding new players and finding new ways to do things, because it's quite clear, for the reasons we outlined earlier on, that these players are not getting any younger, and we need a wee bit of just a bit of energy and vitality back in the team again, I think.
Yeah, Craig, where do you see us looking for striker? Because George Hurst has come in. Che Adams got 9 goals in Italy this season. Didn't really work for him over either game. Lyndon Dykes, 42 caps, hasn't scored in a while. You go through the striking options. Tommy Conway came on and looked actually okay. He was trying really hard, but he was playing out left. He wasn't playing up top. Where do we go for a striker?
I don't know, Ray. I don't like saying that. It's,
come on, Craig, come on with an answer. Come on.
Sorry, I'm not part of the Scottish FA pathway team to help young players develop and progress into the first team. I suppose that the player that you haven't mentioned there was James Wilson, who came off the bench to be the youngest player to have ever made an appearance for Scotland. Phenomenal achievement for him, and I do think that that's a player who does have a high ceiling. I like what I've seen from him for Heart Midlothian, but very much a player that's still learning his trade, learning how to play. I was talking to a friend at Supporters Arts, and they were talking about James Wilson playing out wide because it allows him to learn parts of the game that you might not necessarily get the chance to do when you're playing as a centre forward for a big team like Hearts. So very much he is still like developing his game. So I don't know where these young players are coming from. It felt as though at the Euros, not to jump back a step, but it felt as though the Euros, that was the apex for a lot of players in this team. Guys who had done really, really well at club level, but were getting into their 30s, maybe just 31, 32. And we don't necessarily have the same calibre of players that are coming beneath them. And the team still, when you think about Scotland's best, the players that are coming through, a lot of them are central midfielders, which is brilliant. And when the team do pop the ball around well, they're really good. But I worry if we're going from an over-reliance and needing to have Kieran Tierney fit, if you remember that. Remember when we played against the Czech Republic at the Euros in 2020 when Tierney wasn't playing, you were like, oh my goodness, we're not going to win this. I think we're going from an over-reliance and Kieran Tierney being fit to being Ben Doak. If Ben Doak's not playing, then we're not going to get much from the team. And that's a worry going forward. So that's not really answered the question about the striker, but it's just something.
Yeah, but I mean, but the one thing you would say, Ray, is that, listen, I mean, it's not just Steve Clarke. Scotland managers of the future have got a problem here. Because if you look at these stats for the number of under-21 players playing in the Scottish Premiership, I think Motherwell lead the way with 15% of the minutes for under-21 players, and that's probably entirely down to Lennon Miller. I mean, the clubs are just, whether it's through the size of the league, or whether it's through lack of talent, or whether it's through intransigent managers, they're just not playing young players. At some point, that's really going to hammer the Scotland national team if he's not doing it already.
And Stephen, like, you've worked in media for a long time. That's obviously impacting. Do you think the change in transfer rules down south as well, where they can poach Scottish players aged 14, 15, 16 and then release them aged 19, which seems to happen a lot, that must be a huge impact on the game up here as well, Stephen? What do you think?
Yeah, well, I mean, there's some interesting situations. You look at Bobby Wales at Kilmarnock, who's obviously out of contract there. It looks as if he'll be going down south. A few rumours about Preston North End being seriously interested in him, because these teams, even in the Championship and even at League One, can offer money that clubs up here won't necessarily be offering. Look at Rory Wilson at Aston Villa, who's earning fortunes, who's without really playing a first-team game. It's just difficult to compete, and you do worry that these kids are just disappearing into this black hole, don't you, where they go down south, they don't really play or get first-team games. What you'd love is for them to get 80, 90 first-team games in the Premiership up here, learn their craft, learn their trade, and then make the move. But, money talks, doesn't it?
Yeah, and talking about money talks, you mentioned him there, Craig, Ben Doak. Lots of stuff in the BBC Gossip column yesterday about him leaving Liverpool, heading to Bournemouth perhaps, in a swap deal for Kerkez or Semenyo. It'd be good for him to maybe go to a club like Bournemouth. What do you think?
I mean, in an ideal world, you want to see your best players playing for the biggest teams on the planet. In an ideal world, you want to see like Mohamed Salah disappearing off into the Gulf and Ben Doak taking his place on the right-hand side of that Liverpool attacking trident. But the most important thing for him is to be playing regularly at a very good level. If he moves to Bournemouth, he will be playing regularly at a very good level. So I'm all for it. He's such an exciting player. I love particularly the Nations League games. I think it was against Poland and against particularly one against Poland, Croatia, the latter half. When you're watching him play, you just want to get the ball to Doak. It's brilliant. You don't want to overburden somebody who's only 19 years old, but he has that quality that he can just drag you to the edge of your seat, make you excited about football. And if he's playing regularly at a good level, Scotland will benefit from that.
Yeah, and Greece had that the other night in Karetsis. He looked phenomenal. And Stephen, just finally on Scotland. So Greece looked very, very good in the second half on Thursday and all of the 90 minutes on Sunday. We found out on Sunday night that Denmark are also going to be our group after they lost to Portugal. We're facing a group of Denmark, Greece and Belarus, three sides all in the top 90 in the world, whereas England, I think they've got 120th, they're playing 170th, and I think they've got an away fixture in Lapland. So they are coming out lucky in this. How do you think Scotland are going to do in the next, what is it? By 10 months' time, 7 months' time, this will all be over.
I'm actually thinking of Googling a number for the Samaritans here. I mean, really, be realistic about it. First game is away, September the 5th in Denmark. September the 8th, 3 days later, they're away in Belarus again. So 2 away games right for the very off. Mm-hmm. And then the third game is a home game against Greece at Hampden, which, as we know from the other night, could be quite a fraught evening. So this is a really dangerous and difficult World Cup qualifying campaign for Steve Clarke. He'll tell you it's a land of milk and honey and opportunity, but in reality, this is a real testing ground. And the worry for me, as I said earlier, is that this just begins to peter out a little bit. The World Cup qualification becomes quite obvious quite soon because there's not that many games against 3 other teams. It's just not going to happen, and the whole thing becomes a bit of a damp squib. I desperately hope that's not the case. We've got to remain optimistic, but you wouldn't know it from this podcast so far.
I'd say it's doable. I mean, we've beaten Denmark in the past, albeit that Denmark rested a lot of players after qualifying for the World Cup qualifiers, wasn't it?
Yep.
Aye, for
2-0,
Denmark
yeah.
on the qualifying.
Yeah.
We beat Greece the other night. I know that it was a back to the old performance. I describe it as a spirited performance. And having looked at Belarus's recent results, they've only won 2 of their last umpteen games against the powerhouses of Tajikistan and Luxembourg. So that's doable. It's doable. It's going to be difficult, but if you've got your best players available, if you've got Hickey back playing at right fullback, you've got Ben Doak in the pitch, there's a chance.
See, the minute you say that about Belarus, that just gives me the fear. when you say they don't win games and they don't beat anybody, you think, oh no, I don't like the sound of that one a little bit.
Yeah, Craig, you must have been absolutely buzzing on Sunday night when we get Denmark. Think of the brunch options in Copenhagen. What a treat.
My mind's spinning already, Ray. Mind's spinning already.
Let's turn our attention to the Championship with what is, it said what could be, but what is a massive game tonight. Livy hosts Falkirk with the Bears 11 points clear at the top. I was doing the permutations as you always do at this time of the season. If they win and another team lose, let's be honest, we're close. Craig, as a resident of that area, a Stenhousemuir fan, is this the last chance to reel Falkirk back in for Livy? And is it Falkirk's 2 hands in the trophy?
Yeah, I think that last chance is gone, Ray. I think that we've discussed in this podcast for any time Falkirk lose, they will follow up with a win. They don't do back-to-back defeats. You know, that's just something that they've never really had that over the last 2 seasons. They've just been absolutely flying. And I think that Livingston are a side who are capable of dragging Falkirk down to a level that they're not necessarily comfortable at. I think the 3 games they've played each other earlier in the season have been pretty poor spectacles. They've not been a lot to watch. And I think that even if Livingston do beat Falkirk, there's an 8-point gap between the sides. Can you really see Falkirk chucking away that many points between now and the end of the campaign, and Livingston then going on this unbeaten run? You can imagine Livingston winning most of the fixtures. You just can't see Falkirk losing the rest of them. So I'm going along tonight. I've got my ticket, £24 it cost me. So I'll be looking forward to seeing some high calibre Championship football.
Yeah, the minute you pay £24, it's got 0-0 written all over it, doesn't it?
Exactly what it is. As soon as I hit that pay button, then I thought, yeah, you're going for an absolutely dismal game of football.
Stephen, like Craig said there, Livy struggling a bit, I suppose you say. No wins in March. They've played 3 times. We've waxed lyrical on this podcast numerous times about Scott Arfield. It just seems like Falkirk have got it right, haven't they? Do you expect them to go and win tonight?
Yeah, we will. I mean, it's big for the 2 of them, obviously. If Falkirk go 14 ahead with 5 games to go, that's it. I mean, it's pretty much it done. I mean, it's big for Livy, though, because second is huge for them. I mean, if they win tonight, get it back to 8 points, then they've got a game in hand. And they would have a real good chance of pipping air for second place. But it's big for them financially as well. You know, I think David Martindale's on record saying that they're paying a lot of money for legal fees for their former shareholders and things at the moment. So financially, these are difficult times. So second place and getting that playoff is a big deal for Livingston. And you know, you just know with David Martindale, he's going to implore those players to run through a wall tonight. You would expect that they will. So it's going to be a heck of a game. But yeah, I'm going for a draw.
Yeah, let's not forget.
Sorry, Ray, I was going to say on that as well. You mentioned like Scott Arfield coming there. A player that for Falkirk that I did want to highlight is Tom Lang, the captain, who had been out for most of the season, but he came back and I think he made his first league appearance of the season at the start of March. And every game that he's played in, they've won all 4 of them and they haven't conceded a goal. So it's like I think a lot of discussion about Falkirk now focuses on Scott Arfield. I think he's had a galvanising effect on taking a good group of players and kicking them up a level. But there's still so much to like across that squad. And I think Tom Lang's return to the team, I think that's a player that deserves mention there as well.
Yeah. And Stephen, just to your point as well, finishing second, that's 2 less playoff games in the way it works in the Championship. So there's a huge incentive for that. Talk about the playoff. Morton, I've got Wraith again in the other match tonight. 3 points for either of them. Puts them right up back into contention behind the mighty Partick Thistle in there. The Championship is quite delicious just now, whether you've got Brian Graham doing 16 jobs, you've got the whole resurgence, and the big news on Thursday night, I was hosting off the ball, we got this news in, and I didn't quite believe it. Neil Lennon has taken over at Dunfermline. Craig, I'm going to ask you the question, is it a good fit for the club, and is it a good fit for Neil Lennon?
What I found really interesting is I read an article about Michael Tidzer's ill-fated less than 2 month spell in charge of the club, and
the damned United again, all over again, isn't it?
It was just describing how the club wanted a data-driven and analytical approach to signing players, and a lot of guys had come into the club. I think there was 9 players that came in, and it was all done through this model. And then you're bringing in Neil Lennon, who is, Neil Lennon's got a lot of qualities, but I'm not sure if sports science and data and analytics is one of them. I think in terms of a motivator, he's absolutely fantastic. So I'm not sure what direction the club are going in. However, I think the term new manager bounce was invented for someone like Neil Lennon. I think that's exactly what they'll get. They're coming up against their direct rivals. They've got a Queen's Park team who are without a manager, who again going through their own identity crisis, and then I've got a Hamilton team on the other side who keep losing late goals. I think that's the last couple of games they've chucked away points against Ayr United. In fact, 95-minute equaliser in that game. And on top of that, I think it's they're playing Ayr United this weekend, so it's Scott Brown versus Neil Lennon. There's so much intrigue to this, and I think that what Neil Lennon's best quality is simplifying things and getting players to be the very best versions of themselves. And I do think that's something that Dunfermline need at the moment.
Yeah, I was chatting to a Dunfermline fan on Sunday in the fan zone at Hampden, and he said he thought they were going to get relegated under Tidser. There was no cohesion, so they've pulled the plug. Stephen, you must have a million contacts finding out about all this. What does this say about the ambition of Dunfermline's new owners?
Well, I think the phrase that was used to me was they're going to throw the kitchen sink at this, and they're prepared to. They are going to spend big money. I think the plan is to blow the Championship away next season, provided they can stay up this season, which is what it's all about for Neil Lennon. He's got 7 weeks to basically keep them up, and then I think they're going to spend some reasonable big money. I mean, there was one room I've not got a name for spending like £300,000 on a player from Bulgaria this summer. So I think Dunfermline are planning to spend big dosh. I think they are prepared to invest heavily in the team. As Craig says, they'll back it up with data and analytics, and they will give and do whatever it takes to get themselves back to the Premiership, certainly by this time next year. And I don't think there's any limit to their ambitions to do that as quickly as humanly possible.
Yeah, because investors coming in here and spending heavily has never had a bad effect on Scottish football before, so that's good.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, if you're a Dunfermline fan, you remember how this ends only too well. You think back to the Gavin Masterton and either when John Yotson was the chairman, Ross McCarthy had to come in and tidy up the mess, and it tends to be, you just tend to see these things happening time and again. Your worry would be that an overseas investor comes in, does all this, and then you end up back in a Vladimir Romanov scenario again. Now, you can't tar everybody with the same brush, but equally, it's an actual and obvious concern, isn't it?
Yeah, but at least you'll get a great 9-part podcast series out of it in about 20 years' time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'm taking notes already. I'm keeping a diary. Yeah.
I think as well with Dunfermline coming up, there's a lot of parallels between them and Falkirk, because if you remember, like Dunfermline won League One, Falkirk won it the year after, and where Falkirk have just flourished and gone on. I mean, they're like back-to-back promotions. Dunfermline haven't done that. They've come up, they not far off the playoffs under James McPake, and it just really stagnated. And what's culminating this season is just like a series of bad decisions. Like perhaps they held on to McPake for too long. Tidser was a good manager, but he's certainly the wrong fit for Dunfermline. And it feels as though that you perhaps like look over, to borrow a cliche, look over your neighbour's fence, see how well Falkirk have done and want to try and replicate that model. So they're a big club, Dunfermline. I think they're a really big club, and if they've got the support behind them, I think they can go on to do fantastic things. Just like what Stephen says, so I'd be a wee bit wary as to where that money's coming from and how it's been spent.
Well, that's all we've got time for. Many thanks to Stephen McGowan and Craig Telfer, and thank you for listening. Remember, we're here with new episodes of the Scottish Football Podcast bright and early every day, so to make sure you don't miss out, subscribe on BBC Sounds and have push notifications turned on in your phone. Some huge football this week. We've got Neil Lennon against Scott Brown's Ayr United on Saturday, the big game in the Championship tonight, and any kind of football is welcome, so forget that game at Hampden on Sunday. Thanks for listening and enjoy your day.
On BBC Sounds. From life aboard a Russian submarine to chairman of Hearts Football Club.
At this stage, he was the hero.
But as his controversial decisions escalated...
They said, we're going to sack George. And I'm going, you can't do this.
How did Vladimir Romanov go from Hearts saviour to a wanted man?
He caused a whole load of chaos and havoc.
Romanov, Tsar of Hearts. Listen now on BBC Sounds.